Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the XWF podcast with your host, Chronic Chris Page, them no good bastards, Thunder Knuckles, Bobby Bourbon, and yes, if available, Bearded War Pig. And the action starts now.
And welcome to another episode of the XWF podcast, guys. Chris Page here. Being joined this evening, very special episode. We're going to be taking a look back at two very, very influential people within the Federation. Without them, actually, none of this would be possible. So there's two sides to the story. There's the in character and development of their characters as writers, and then there's the owner aspect of this that we're going to jump into and cover. That being said, let me welcome in the first guest is our principal owner, the one and only Loverboy Vinnie Lane. Thank you, sir, for coming in to chat with me tonight.
Hey, cats and kittens, it's your boy Vinny. How you doing, Chris? Glad to be here.
You know, man, I'm living that dream, man. You know how Florida is. You don't ever get a day below 90 from this point through the end of December.
I will tell you, it is 85 degrees in New Jersey today. I am in the basement because it's too hot upstairs.
That's a crying shame. We've also got Vinny's right hand man, and you'd almost call him co-owner. He really needs no introduction. Everybody knows who you are. Theo Pryce, man. Thank you, sir, as well. I know it's a little hard to get everyone's schedule to jive so we can get some stuff done like this, but I'm looking forward to jumping into it because you guys got some really good stories.
Absolutely. I appreciate you having us back on. It's always fun for us to listen to the podcast. So taking part in it is even better, I think. And hopefully the people listening would agree.
Well, I think too, like the regular episodes where we're covering results and going over the cards and talking about our pay-per-views and what have you. Those are great and they're fun to do. It's just here lately, it's like these little bonus episodes that we're starting to record. That's kind of taking the direction of the podcast in general, if that makes sense. Like we just did there's, as of this recording, the TV title episode hasn't aired yet. We're talking about doing one with the Heart Championship. We're talking about doing one with the Uni Championship. It's just a whole big conglomerate of stuff going on that we can talk about, and the doors are wide open for it.
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed the they're starting to run together because there's two of them back to back. But the episode you had with Scent, where you didn't really discuss results. It was mostly just kind of like an origin story of the character, where he came from, what he's been doing, popping up some old names that I've heard but didn't really know a whole lot about. So like you said, the special non-results centric episodes, that was pretty cool.
It's taken on a life of its own, and that's where I'm digging this show, because there's so much that we can cover between the both of you collectively, because Theo, you came in I think you said 2013, so you're looking at 8 years, and Vinny's right behind you with like 7.5. So we're talking history that can be covered between both of your stints here. Theo, let me start with you because you did come in first. What led you to the XWF? I think, if memory serves, you saw it on the top 50, eFed sites, and you just kind of moseyed on over. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I mean, I had eFedded when I was a kid, like middle school, early high school, and at the time, it was mostly like real wrestler feds. I had done some creator wrestler feds. I had a couple different characters. Some were successful, some not. Actually, one of my more successful characters was his name Sean Price, but Price. And I am, despite how much I try to be creative, I'm not necessarily always. And sometimes my names that I'll come up with are like combinations of characters I've used before or changing the spellings of things. So Theo Pryce, Theo came from, at the time when I filled out my application and when I joined this Fed, it was the day before my oldest kid was born. His name is Theodore. So we knew at the time that's what we were going to name him. And so I just picked that name, figured I'd run with it. Oddly enough, though, we don't ever call him Theo. It's usually just Teddy or Theodore if he's getting yelled at. But that's kind of where that came from, the name Theo Pryce. And yeah, I think I signed up literally the day before he was born. But yeah, I found it on like one of the top wrestling eFed sites. I don't even know like what, like I can't remember why I decided to like try eFedding again. Like I was out of the game for I want to say it was about a decade, if not maybe more. And I was like, I don't at the time, I didn't have a kid. And so I was like, I need a kind of a hobby, like something to do. I enjoyed writing. I enjoyed coming up with stories and working with other people. Oddly enough, wrestling is probably my least favorite part of the whole eFed experience. I don't watch a ton of it, and never really did. I think part of why I got out of it was I was a big WCW guy, and when WCW went under, I didn't watch WWF, or I think it's WWF at the time. I didn't really pay attention to that whole era, which a lot of people tell me was one of its best eras. So like I stopped watching wrestling, and I think I just kind of gave up eFedding, was out of it for a while, found the XWF on the list. I don't remember where it was on the list, like if it was first, second, third, whatever. I don't really remember, but found it, signed up for it, and just kind of hit the ground running. I think my very first match actually was, I think it was a Leap of Faith qualifying, or not Leap of Faith, I'm sorry, Lethal Lottery qualifying match. Like it was so maybe a 3-on-3 or a 4-on-4, something like that, because at the time it was end of September. And Lethal Lottery is always like the November pay-per-view when we had them. So my first match was like a qualifying match for that pay-per-view.
When you came in, I mean that's how you mean the lethal lottery cycle was always that last cycle of the year. So at the time, what did the landscape look like?
So at the time, there was, I think there was like two to three big stables. There was the Black Circle, which was run by the previous owner, and had guys like John Madison, Azrael Erebus, I think that's how you pronounce that last name, Luca Arzagotti, uh, another one of Azrael's characters, and I think that was it. There had been others previously. Then there was the Congregation, which was run by Eli James, and that congregation was like aligned with the Black Circle. Eli was like a sort of member of the Black Circle, but sort of not. And then there was the Brotherhood, which was led by Sebastian Duke, and I really don't recall who else was in that. There was a couple other people in it, but Sebastian Duke had been in the Black Circle, and then I think he left the group or turned on them, something like that. So those were kind of the three big stables at the time. I'm trying to think who the champions were. John Madison at the time was the king of the XWF, which was their version of the Universal title. Like the Universal title did not exist at that point. I think it had previously, but then was replaced by the king of the XWF. The Universal champion, I want to say it might have been Gilmore, actually, because he had won that title a couple times.
Was that when Santos no showed and
I
had to
don't think he beat
go to
Santos. I think he beat shit. I don't remember because I think he had the title like right when I showed up, and he didn't have the title long. And I want to say he won it back, and then what was weird is he was a guy that was like booked all the time, like every show he was on it. But then he won the title, and he like just stopped opting in for shows and stopped taking matches, which was then the impetus for, you can't just hold the title for 8 weeks to get a briefcase. Now you have to start having X number of defenses. So that part of the rule did not exist at first. It was added because Peter Gilmore went into hiding after winning the title. So I always kind of refer to it as the Gilly rule. But that's kind of where that came from. Mr. Supernova was in the midst of like a year-long TV title reign, and that's also Azrael's, like one of the many names that Azrael went by, was Mr. Supernova. So he was the TV champ at the time. The tag champs, I want to say that was Griffin McAllister and Sebastian Duke, and they held the titles for a long time. They may say they. I don't. Is Cataclysm the longest reigning like 2-man championship team? Because if it's not them, then I'm pretty sure it's the Brotherhood.
It might be, Doc and Unknown Soldier had it for a really
Okay.
long time. So I don't
Yeah,
know.
there's that too. Yeah, that's true. I forgot about that because I don't remember. I wasn't really paying
Griffin
attention.
McAllister is a name that sounds familiar to me. I think Theo, I think you and I missed each other, but it had to have been just a couple months because if that was in the other guy's reign, and I was
Yeah.
here when that started.
So Griffin, yeah, was another character of Azrael's.
Okay,
Different character, same handler. And I think when I showed up,
okay,
that handler had like 3 main characters that I was aware of. There was Griffin McAllister, Azrael Rubis, and Olive Pendershore. Yeah. So
There
I
are
think
so
those are the
many.
3
There are
main.
so many.
There are. There's got to be at least 30. And those are the ones I know about.
okay, all right, I got you.
Yeah, and I think those are the tag champs. I think those were the only titles we had at the time. So I mean, John Madison is one of the best I've ever seen at writing. When it comes to trash talk, his stuff is pretty crazy. I feel like I faced him twice, I think, and the first time I didn't know the first time. So when I won the King of the XWF, when I beat him for that title, that was at Leap of Faith. That was the first title I ever actually won in the XWF, which was the top title. Um, and that came about because I had lost in the qualifying for Leap of Faith at some point along the line. So I was out of the running for that, final spot or the final 4, or however many people they put in the pay-per-view. And the former owner put up a poll and said, here's the people that we're going to nominate for having a match against John Madison. And he let the roster pick. And I won that poll somehow. I don't know, but I did. So I faced him, beat him, and that was kind of, I want to say I got lucky in the sense that I don't know what my career would have been like in the XWF had I not lucked out and won the top title as my first title. Like, I think that's not necessarily most people's experience. They usually start at the bottom or work their way up, or maybe somewhere in the middle. But for me, I won that and just kind of, my character joined the Black Circle, became part of that group, kind of became like John Madison's protege, so to speak. And that was kind of the angle I ran for a while. And then really my only real big feud in the Fed was against Eli James. And that feud lasted, I want to say maybe like a year off and on, because Eli wasn't always around. Like, he would kind of be around for a couple months and then he'd disappear, do some other things. So we always kind of had something going on. That was my real big main feud. In terms of other titles, like I won the TV title with Theo. Did I win the TV title? I don't remember. I won the United States title. I won the Extreme title, the tag team titles a couple times, and the trios titles a couple times. And those were all with like the Kings in various incarnations of that group. But yeah, I mean, that was most of what I did with Theo. Like, he's my most successful character, but I don't know that I would say he's like my favorite. Oddly enough, I'd say it's probably Drew Argyle, just because he's so different. Like, you can do anything with him. He's been a pirate. He was a street person living in a tent in Chicago. Like, you can do anything you want with him, and I can roll with it. And he's just kind of there for like comedy purposes, whereas Theo is much more serious, and he's just kind of your typical, stereotypical, like, just rich, arrogant guy. That's really all he is. In terms of like OOC, how I kind of became a GM, I want to say almost like a year after I joined, maybe a little less than that. There was a guy who was running Monday Night Madness, and I think it was supposed to be like his first show running it by himself, and he like flaked out, like just disappeared. Nobody knew why, and I don't know that I got an answer. But I had said to I don't remember if I said it to the previous owner or just one of the GMs, like, hey, I've been a GM before, like I know the general idea. At the time I was helping writing matches, which is something I don't do anymore because I just don't enjoy it. And I don't think, because I don't watch wrestling, I feel like I'm not a good match writer. But I said, I can help put shows together and I can do that stuff. So I did that for a period of time, like on a trial basis. And John Madison and the guy who handles Unknown Soldier, as well as Paul Heyman / Sebastian Duke, helped train me and teach me how to GM and kind of a lot of the ins and outs of how this Fed does shows and stuff like that. And I did that for a while. I ran Madness for a while, and then I shifted over to when Paul Heyman came back. Madness was like his thing, like it was his show, his brand. It was really important to him. So when he came back to GM, I switched over to running Warfare for a while, and I did that for a good period of time. Eventually, I kind of moved into a role that's similar to what I have now, but not as encompassing. Like I was kind of overseeing GMs a little bit, but I didn't have as much involvement with like the bigger picture stuff. I didn't do any of the like board moderation type stuff. There was no admin work that I was doing. That was all pretty much the previous owner and John Madison. Um, yeah, so I did that for a while. I don't recall exactly how long. It was a couple years. And then some things happened. Some of the GMs left, and the previous owner wanted to essentially promote a roster member to a GM spot. It was somebody that I think all of us who know this person can agree with this was not a good fit. And I think Lane will kind of touch into this when it's his turn because it's kind of the impetus for how he got to where he is. But I had talked to the previous owner. I was like, I just don't think this is a great idea. Like I'll try and do it if you want me to. Like if this is what you want, I'll try and stick it out. But I don't think it's a great idea. And he pretty much was like, well, then you can just leave. I was like, all right, well, all right, I'll go. I left for I don't know, maybe a year, maybe a little less. And then like out of the blue, Lane, I don't even know if he messaged me. I think he literally just like added me to a GM chat and was like, here's Theo, here's Duke. They're gonna help train the new GMs. And it was interesting because I don't know that Lane and I had really talked a whole lot like previously, even when he came in as a wrestler. Like I don't know that we had a ton of interactions. I think most of it was just communicating in like Skype chat at the time, but like it wasn't a one-on-one thing. It was just in group chats. So I don't
Yeah,
necessarily
there wasn't a
I
lot.
don't even know like what made him think of bringing me in and all that. But that's
Let's
kind of where
let's backtrack for a second because and that's a lot to digest in a quick period of time. Let's hang on. I want to go back to when I wanted to get to when Vinny came into the Fed. Um, where were you on the card when Loverboy showed up into the WCW as a wrestler?
when did you show up, Lane?
Okay, yeah. So I came in either July or August of 2014. It was somewhere right around there, end of July, early August. At the time, I don't think Theo was holding any titles or anything like that, but he was still active. He was still competing. Because one of my first matches, actually, you know what? It was right around when he was doing the Enigma gimmick. That's when it was.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I
I
did.
was in a trio with Duke and Azrael as Enigma, which ended up being Theo Pryce under a mask, which is a
Mm.
whole gimmick I came up with the sole purpose of trying to obtain a briefcase so that if Eli James ever won the Universal title, I could cash in on him, which, as luck would have it, he did do, and I did cash in on him. Um, but
It
yeah,
worked.
so you're right. I think, yeah, one of the first matches, it might have been that trios match, and I think you won. Did you not?
I did. That was my.
Yep.
I always like to. I like to bring it up, especially with when Thad's around, because it's the only time he and I ever competed. So I always like to remind him that I'm undefeated against Duke.
But that eats him up, and, and you know it. Um,
Oh, for sure.
now, while you guys were in competition mode, um, did your paths ever cross as opponents? I mean, obviously the trios match you're referred to, but like in singles action, did you guys ever cross or maybe tag together.
Never one-on-one. It was that trios match, which I won because I don't know. That was because it was so early in the run. I was just like, I just went at it really. But then there was another when I lost back the trios titles was to Theo, and he had Samuels and Madison as his partner. So we were like 1-1 then. And then I think the only other time Vinnie and Theo were in the ring together was when it was me and James Raven and John Brown against the Kings again. So I think he's one up on me.
Yeah, we did tag once, but not as Theo and Lane. That was Corvus. And
that's a whole other
yeah.
I want to float this out there and go ahead and put this in the universe, just because I think that I think it'd be awesome, even if it was just like an anarchy rules under anarchy rules. But I think we need to see Vinny and Theo at Relentless. Just as a showcase, not as a build, just a showcase match, throwback. The appeal is there.
Is it?
I think so.
I
mean, yeah. Oh, he would. He absolutely would. I won't. I won't even deny it. And that's part of why I like writing with Drew is because like there's just not that pressure there. Lane would take me to school, especially when it comes to something like trash talk. That's not my strong suit. I'm better at it with Theo than I am with anyone else, but I'm still not. It's not something I'm confident in, which is always interesting when people are asking for feedback. And like one of the things I have to talk about is trash talk, and I tell them like straight up, I'm like, look, if I'm criticizing your trash talk, please understand it's not coming from a place where like I think I'm top tier shit talker, because I am not. And anybody who's ever talked to me will tell you I've said it repeatedly. I am not. But that's something that Lane is extremely good at. And so, yeah, he'd smack me. But if people want to see it, I'm sure it's something we could work out at some point, centered around something kind of fun.
I'm always down for like little one-offs like that. I mean, I'm fun with them. I did it against Raven once. I won by accident. That wasn't really the way it was supposed to go. It was just supposed to be like this. Oh, look, it's these two big names or whatever, and and then he went and stupidly won the Extreme title in the 24/7 boards, and then I beat him and ended up holding a damn championship while owning the Fed. I was like, it's not what I wanted.
Right.
Brother.
Yeah.
If I told you, I feel you. I understand. It's happened. I understand. I get it. It happened to me in the WGWF, and I took that. It was I won the belt unintentionally, and I dropped the belt. Like I did a special house show 24 hours later, and dropped the belt to right back to who I forget who the champion was. I was like, no, I'm not doing this. I'm not doing it. Now I'm going to put you in the ring on the next show, and if you pull the same shit, now we'll yank the belt that way.
It was actually kind of fun, honestly, just because even though I didn't like the optics of it, and Theo can tell you, I never really liked the optics of active management being involved in the title game, really. But that championship in particular is just so much fun to defend the 24/7 pins and stuff like that. So
well,
I was
that's
having
what
a blast doing that.
Right, I was about to go there. I was about to say you had that crutch and that fallback of having to have the boards there and be creative and kind of just pick and choose when I get it. That would have made it and taken it to a completely different level.
Yeah, so it was a fun time. I didn't have it for terribly long, but I think it also was kind of a motivator because it was me. Like people were going crazy, falling all over themselves trying to pin me because of course they're going to. So it was fun.
I bet the kickouts were witty and fucking clever though. I'm gonna have to go back and find those.
They're there. Go look for them.
Just because I think it would be an interesting little ride. So Vinny, we know Theo got to the top of the mountain. Obviously, you did too. You won the Universal Championship, right?
Say that again. I didn't hear you.
You've won the Universal Championship, correct?
Yes, I won it in 15. It was the middle of 15 that I won it. So I was there for about a year before I really even got a crack at it. My first attempts at it were around that time, and I lost the first time I had an attempt at it, and then won the next time. I took it off at Doc.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we made up since then. But
Okay, well, good. I mean, I know I haven't had a deep dive with Doc yet, but that's on my bucket list to get done. I think it would be a very interesting episode. But that's a fun little fact there.
I would
Uh,
say, he and I that year, basically from after I got my feet wet and was there for a month or two, the next year was basically just a long build up story between Doc and I. And I think both of us would agree. I think if you asked him, he would agree that that's probably the peak for both of us, was just working off of each other.
and while you're running this, Theo, is this where you and the Kings are doing the trios? And
I need to look that up because I think that was around the same time. Let me see. 'Cause we did it more than once. The first time was November of 2014, and we had them for
That's when he beat me and Gilly and Morbid Angel.
right. I think after that was not long after that I left, and I wasn't around for that, or if I was, it wasn't as Theo. Like I had other characters at the time because I was around during like Lane and Doc and Gator, LH Harrison, Justin Sane, like that whole crop of people, but it
I
wasn't
know
really
you.
active as Theo.
There was Brick Squad stuff. There was, and
Mm-hmm.
then there was just you were still doing your GM stuff at the time too. I don't
Yeah,
know.
at the
I don't
time
remember.
I was GMing as Ozymandias.
Yeah, I don't remember when Ozzy exactly took his swan song, but I think it was around then.
Yeah.
when you get to, you know, obviously you've done the character stuff. Now let's shift and kind of pick up where Theo left off. Earlier, it was it just kind of gotten to that point to where enough was enough, and I've been there. I get it. When you walked away, and then you've got that callback from Vinnie. Like, you said it was probably a year, give or take. Let's be specific there. Um, Vinny, what led you to reach out to Theo in the scenario around it? Because now I'm assuming that we've transitioned into maybe you getting more of a hands-on role with the Fed.
Yeah, well, okay. So during my run that I had with the uni title is when I got bumped into a GM role, and that was the previous guy's call. He needed GMs. I'm sure I was one of the last names on his list because, as Theo can attest, the dude never liked me. But there weren't really very many. There was, all the GMs kind of left because of another guy that got promoted to the GM status. And nobody liked him. He's gone. Nobody likes him to this day. So whatever. I sucked it up and I was just like, whatever, I'll do it because I liked the place. I cared about it. The owner was pretty much absent all the time. So it was really just me and this other guy, and the other guy stunk. So then it was kind of just me. Then something dramatic happened in real life on that other guy's end, and it was really just me. So I didn't really know what to do. Honestly, I reached out to some people. Theo and I had spoken. We were in contact here and there, in little side chats. He wasn't in the Fed at all at the time, and I just sort of told him what was going on, and I said, "Hey, would you be willing to help out?" And luckily for me, and luckily for the Fed and everybody involved, he said yes, because him helping me out has been what's kept everything chugging along. And we're the only two constants really since then.
When obviously it's breath of fresh air to get Theo back on board, and Theo, I mean, obviously, I guess I want to get to is what did did you know that Theo was a prior GM beforehand, or did you guys? Okay, so that's you. All right, got you. That's how we got there.
Yeah, I was well aware that he was not only that he was the GM, but he was at the time when I was just as a wrestling character. He was generally the one that I would go to when I had an issue because he made sense, and he made sensical decisions, in my opinion. When I would go to the other guys, it would be something retarded. So Theo was the best choice.
Makes sense. Gotcha. So you guys get back into the mix, and this is where, I mean, unfortunately, history is history. You can't change it even if you want to. And there was that kind of darker period, but when you kind of took that bull by the horns and assumed the responsibility, you reached out and started to build your team. Now you got Theo on board, who was another option or another selection that you reached out to try and keep the ship together. Because here's the thing that I think a lot of people lose sight of is regardless of how you slice the pie, is the XWF as a whole has been around for 22 years.
Yeah.
This,
Yeah, I mean, our chunk of it is a third of that or so, but I would say probably the most dramatic third.
Yeah. I mean, there were. I can give my personal experience when I was here under the other regime, and he was just building. I was here for 6 or 7 months until some shenanigans went down, and I walked away too. So I completely understand why people would, and understand how it could get there. You obviously have a different vision. You have a different idea and a different concept. You've got
Yes.
Theo. Who else are you reaching out to build your team? Because this is not, when you run a Fed, if you've never done it before, then people don't really understand. They don't get it. They don't understand the work that goes into it. They don't understand the nonsense that you have to deal with, some of the petty complaints to juvenile dumb shit. Like, it all points in between. Like, they will never get it because it's way harder than it appears.
Yeah.
So talk to me about building your team and what was important key factors to right this ship and start building the foundation back up.
Yeah, I mean, at first, I reached out to basically people who I thought had similar opinions towards, the things I didn't like previously, the directions I wanted to go in, and things like that. So Theo and I are pretty lockstep in that regard. We bounce stuff off each other. We come up with a lot of cool ideas, and we're not a hothead at the same time, which is great because sometimes when I'm pissed off about something, Theo's like, "Hey, just shut up and chill out." I've done it for him a couple of times, so it works out really well. Theo's number one. He's the most important part of the machine, in my opinion. Back then, I mean, I got a lot of GMs wrong. I'll be honest. I gave people a shot. I mean, even Graves was involved at one point, not for terribly long. He's just got busy, I think. Doc helped me out here and there back then as well. Gator helped out here and there back then, but those guys were also at the time, they just weren't really around very much, so it was very spotty. So there's kind of a revolving door. I mean, there was a lot of GMs at that point. But the constant was always Theo and I. That's really when we started having to heavily outsource the writing of the shows themselves. That's like kind of when we birthed the writing forums, and okay, hey, pick your matches. We need you guys to write all of them, basically. Because we couldn't write that much. We couldn't put a show together that was any good with just the two of us. And I've always believed that the show kind of has to reflect the level of effort that people are giving us. So if people are writing 20, 30, 40, 50 RPs and 5,000 words a piece, and I give them some hunk of shit that's 1,000 words with just some plain results, they're all going to quit.
Yeah, I understand that. When you took over day to day, which that was, you said January of 2019, is that right?
Well, no, there's kind of a gray area, right? So because I became what I guess you would call there's like the administrative status, which is like a step above the regular GMs, right? So this is when I was able to go in and start actually doing things to the website itself, making more executive decisions and stuff like that. The GMs were basically just showrunners, if you know, and enforcing the rules here and there. So that was around late 2016 is when I moved into that role, and really that's when it was really just me doing everything, and reaching out to Theo was around then. When we actually transferred officially ownership of the brand of the XWF itself, that was the beginning of 2019.
Okay. So when you're running, let's go. Okay, got you. So we'll go back to 2017, and you're rebuilding the brand. What's the vision? Where do you? What's your goal now? Because what product you've been handed,
Yeah.
and you know that you're trying to do something completely different. Um, Walk me through that. Tell me
My
what you're good.
my goal with it, and still is, really is I try to present something for everybody, right? And I try to kind of figure out what everything and what everybody is in the first place. That's why I kind of branched off and went on Twitter and things like that, and to begin with, or go on Reddit these days, is because I kind of just like to see what people are enjoying doing. Um, so that kind of kept in mind that, okay, people like having options. You know, we at the time, it was Warfare was every 2 weeks, and we decided, okay, well, Savage will be every week, right? So that way, because some people preferred having just the 1 week window to RP, and some people liked the 2 week window.
Hmm.
Back then, there still weren't any sort of limits on anything. It was still just write as much as you wanted to, but it was like, okay, here's a weekly show, here's a bi-weekly show. There weren't as many people on the roster at that point, so it was a little easier to keep a handle on. But that was the same idea. I was just kind of trying to broaden it and say, like, okay, I can reach out to people who want a weekly window, and I can reach out to people who want a bi-weekly window, and I have something for each one of them. And then, later on, we added Anarchy, like a year ago, or maybe a little bit more, and that was for people who wanted to do the micro style writing. So that's kind of always the idea, is what can I think, what kind of person that we're not reaching right now can we make room for somehow? And that's exactly what the plan was even back then. That's always what my goal was.
I think to a degree, it was also kind of like modernizing the Fed. Like the previous owner had a very set way of how he wanted to do things. He did not want an imprint on Twitter. The podcast is probably something you never would have seen under him. To say nothing of his rules per se. He had his way of doing it, and that's fine. It was his Fed; he could do whatever he wanted to it. But it was kind of in its own little corner of the eFed world. There wasn't a ton of exposure out there for other people. There wasn't a lot for other people compared to now, like Lane said. The goal is to have something for everyone, be it, matches that have RP limits or matches that don't, ones that have word limits and ones that don't, ones that have a number of RPs that you can do compared to none. Like we try and hit every note Anarchy with the the micro RPs, and now we have the BWO thing, which is going to be strictly angled. So I think that was a lot of it, was just modernizing the Fed and dragging it out of the dark ages.
Yeah, and I mean, Theo touched on it, right? But I mean, a lot of it was, and look, I mean, we just put it out there. The guy who owned it before is a fuckhead, and he was really more into gross shit. I don't know, just like embarrassing, weird shit that I would not be able to show anybody, really. I mean, it was fun to partake in to a degree, just because it was so ridiculous, but it's not what I wanted something that I was in charge of to be like, right? So those were the things that I tried to change. I mean, Theo can even probably attest that I think even like the day I joined the Fed back in 2014, I like immediately rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, because like one of my first posts was like, "Are you kidding me? Like, what is this bullshit? Like, what are you guys, 10?"
100% true. Like literally the very first interaction I had with him, because I was GMing at the time, and I'm just like, who is this fuckhead? Like, he came off just. Most people, when they're brand new, they try and fly under the radar a little bit, kind of get the lay of the land, so to speak. Not this guy. This guy came in like guns blazing, and I don't even remember what his gripe was, and I'm sure it was a legitimate concern because I mean, he's not somebody who complains just to complain. Like if he says something, even then, it was probably something worth looking at. But yeah, I think he did rub some people the wrong way at first. But I mean, the more you talk to him, you get to know him. Like, it comes from a good place. And I think most people that interacted with him now would say the same thing. Like, everything he says pretty much there's a logic and a reason behind it. And it was the case even then too, even if it was shocking, just shocking to see.
Well, I remember that, honestly, it came from not even a place of. It was more honestly surprise. It was, I believe, the wording of the post. I could probably even go back and find it.
I'm actually
Was
looking
like,
for it right
oh, yeah. I was like, oh, I guess it's still, little kids that do e-fetting, because there's no way that like adults are writing this. Like, this is absurd. Like, this is, we're literally having matches where people are getting buried in human shit and stuff like that. I was like, people are like, this is all run by a bunch of 12-year-olds, right? And it wasn't, obviously. And I think that hurt some feelings. But yeah, I mean, it was just a matter of.
Who fucking who?
Yeah.
Let me be perfectly honest. Like my situation was, I got out before all that happened. Thank God. But I was so bothered, um, how I was treated personally. I vowed when I left that I would never come back. Wasn't gonna happen. Um,
Well,
and
that was kind of part of something I had started doing back then too, which got a lot of blowback. And I don't mean to cut you off, Paige. We can get back to
no,
this.
go ahead.
But around that 16, 17 time was when I first reached out to James Raven, and this was not something that the former guy wanted to do. He was heavily against it. Everything was a warning, like, you don't understand how these guys are. You can't trust these old heads like Raven and his buddies. Like, they'll fuck you over. They'll talk shit about you. Blah 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 blah. I'm not exaggerating when I tell you personally, Paige, that your name, every version that you could come up with your character names, was blocked on our website. I went and unblocked like 10 different versions of Chronic Chris Page because you couldn't even type it. Something else would come up instead. So I mean, that's
I think I'm aware of what may have come up.
yeah.
I mean, a spade's a spade. I am what I am, but I'm definitely not that. I'm a homosexual male in 2021 that's happily married and
So it wasn't
living
even
the
that.
dream.
I will say it wasn't that.
Oh,
It wasn't anything like
that's shocking.
yeah.
Now that's shocking.
It wasn't homophobic or anything like that. I'll give that much credit, but it was extremely petty. One of the first characters that I actually worked with was a character that was a picture of Ryan Reynolds with a bunch of dildos taped to his head, and his name was Mr. WGWF.
That's awesome. That's so petty.
Yeah,
That's awesomely petty.
and that's 2014. So that's like what, a year and a half after that split.
Well, in 2014, I was also booming. I think that's when I had like 50 characters on the roster, and of those 50, like legit, I think I had 41 handlers.
Wow.
Like, and then there were just a handful that handled multiples. But that was when I blew up. I had a lot going on then. And I just kind of tuned the XWF out. Like, we were doing our own shit. We were doing our podcast back then too, and he always knew that the drama was there. I just never paid attention to it. I was just kind of doing my own thing, and and having a lot of fun doing it. The only person I banned from my Fed was Gilly, and that was because I just couldn't deal with it anymore, and had conversations after conversations after conversations, and I banned him finally. And
Gilly's been banned from everywhere. He doesn't even care. I think Gilly likes being banned.
it's almost like he keeps a running tally. But when I got to the point to where I was done even with my Fed, I think it was like 2016-ish,
Yeah.
maybe.
See that, and that's right around. Like I said, I decided. It just kind of occurred to me because these guys would come up all the time, right? Like Raven would come up all the time in conversation, or guys like Centurion would come up, or Chris Page, and all these. And I'm like, man, like these guys sound like they were cool, you know. Like, has anybody even tried to reach out to them, basically? And it was always like, no, you can't talk to them, you can't trust them, they'll fuck everything up, they'll ruin everything. But
I mean,
eventually, I was allowed to reach out to Raven, and I was like, okay.
If being rational is gonna fuck you over, brother, then I mean, I'll do it all day, every day.
It was just weird, you know. It was a weird situation, and then like especially because I brought Raven in for that angle that we did, and I got Jonathan to be involved with it, even though his participation was minimal. But it was a cool angle. I thought it was a fun angle, and what I realized out of it was Raven's like just really cool and like really easy to work with, and there was no drama whatsoever. I mean, just like he's the same right now. Everything's just cool with the guy. And then
It
it was
seems
kind of
like I don't let me cut you off real quick because that angle. I'm sorry, man. That angle seems like that's almost like a gap bridging
yeah,
little
that was the
angle.
idea of it. That was the whole point of it. Was why don't I reach out to these guys who were here yesteryear and see if we can get them back involved? Because the way I saw it was, if these people are still interested and they're still into the idea of it, like we get a bunch of talented guys in one fell swoop, and that's awesome. It didn't end up happening right away because the fucktard before me was still really resistant to a lot of certain names. You especially, you were one of the number one names that the guy just did not want around.
Which is still so weird to me because and again, unless Chris Page was a completely different person, then I have had nothing but positive experiences in any way that I've dealt with you, either behind the scenes or in character stuff or just general bullshitting. Like it's been nothing but a great experience. Same thing with Raven, and a handful of others that have come back. Like I like to break sense balls all the time, but like I like the guy. He's fun. He's good to talk to. So yeah, it is interesting because like Lane said, there's so many people there's like we're not allowed to be here. I'm like, but why? Because we had people here that really should not have been here. Somebody like Gilly who was just toxic to the Fed in general, and nobody seems to want the guy around. Yet these people who have been great were
Outside
persona non grata for so long.
outsider's perspective, like it a way for him to protect what he had at that time, because he knew me and he knew that if I was gonna be asked, I was damn sure gonna tell. You don't know my full story. There's a lot to it. So when I worked with him back in 2019, that was a bigger deal OOC than it was in character.
I
And
knew that.
I think maybe you two might know that a lot better than most. And I had to put a lot aside just to get that done. Going
I
back,
think when because that was on the XX show, right? Specifically.
no, that was at the last Lethal Lottery. When we ran the
Okay.
match.
That's right. And that was actually, from what I recall, that pairing was his idea, which I found strange.
I mean, I got a story for that.
Okay.
We'll get there. I want to get to you reached out to Raven. You kind of bridged that gap. That was in like 2017, right? Give or
Something
take.
like that. Yeah.
And were you able to get him more, maybe hands on with you and Theo because I mean, obviously Raven is I've worked with the kid. I'm the kid. He's definitely not a kid. The guy for God damn, I don't know, 12 years, 13 years. He helped me out with my Fed when I had an issue, and it took me down for like 7 weeks. I was running weekly programming. It's a lot for somebody to assume the responsibility of running weekly programming for 7 weeks with 35 fucking guys on the roster. But he stepped up and did it, no problem. He's that guy.
Yeah,
So
he did help out a little bit when he first came back, because that was kind of always the thing. I was like, well, how about we, if you don't want to have like a real, role playing run, like why don't you just get involved and help me out with run? And that was kind of a tightrope walk though, because that meant that he had to interact with the previous guy. So that was always kind of a weird balancing act. He was there, but he didn't really like being there for that reason. So I mean, it was something that was kind of touch and go. But he ended up having, I think, like an amazing like role play run. I mean, he won the uni title. He was killing everybody. Thad Duke just about bent over backwards to kiss his ass. It was pretty fun. He still.
so you're saying old Dookie broke out the chapstick on that one?
Oh yeah. he was real excited when I first did the reveal that it was Raven that I was bringing in. I mean, Thad might have legitimately IRL passed out. Like he was really excited about it. It was funny the way that all came about too, because literally, like, again, this is for only a few months at that point did I really have access to the backside of the website and things like that. So I was kind of just dicking around and looking through files, and I saw like old band accounts and band email addresses and things like that. And I saw one that I ran across was, it was Raven's real name, right? His IRL name.
Yes.
And I don't remember how it popped up, but I was like, man, this thing's all over the place. And I asked the previous owner, I said, who was he? Who was this guy? And he said, oh, that's James Raven. He sucks. Don't talk to him. So I actually looked him up on Facebook.
Yeah.
And because all I had was his real name. Really, I didn't have any other way to contact the guy, and kind of just jumped right into it. I got like just thrown around by a big group chat that he had on there, because everybody was like, "Oh, you're the new XWF guy. Like, you guys suck. Your guys are terrible." And I was like, "Well, no, that's not me." I was like, "I'm not the guy you're mad at. Trust me." I was like, "I'm trying to fix it. I'm trying to talk to you guys and get people involved." And I think everybody's cool now, except the one who was really nasty to me was Dante Angles. I think he's the only one that's still not involved, really.
I know exactly who you're speaking of.
Yeah.
All too well.
But everybody else was really cool. I was like, well, this is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to I want to get people involved. I want to bridge that gap, like you said, Paige. Raven liked my idea. I was like, I'm gonna do a thing where Vinnie Lane is a bad guy, which I hadn't really done a lot of. But he's like hungry with power. He's filled up to the brim. He's like, I'm the owner. Here's two other owners, and we're gonna kill everybody. Was basically the angle. And Raven was dope. I mean, me and Raven worked really well together. Jonathan shit the bed, so we lost, but that's okay.
We get through that. You get to that, and you get through that. So behind the scenes, when do you start phasing out to really be the focal point? I mean, I'm guessing what I'm trying to say is, while you're kind of handling shit and holding it down, what's the involvement of the other guy? I mean, like, what are your responsibilities to him at this point?
I just couldn't change anything too drastically. He didn't really do anything. He was not a very active. He wasn't very actively running things day to day. That was me.
Other than telling you who not to talk to, right?
Yeah, that's the sort of thing I mean. If I had like an idea, like, hey, how about we tell people not to use these certain racial epithets, or slurs, that was nixed. That was no, you can't do that. I said, okay, well, how about if we put word limits or role play limits in place? I don't know, you can't do that. So anything that was like really foundationally a part of the rules, I couldn't touch without really, I would try to talk him into things, but he didn't want to change too much. He didn't really like Theo said, he didn't like going on to Twitter and doing stuff, recruiting that way, because I mean, honestly, my opinion is because if the internet looks at you and sees the sort of thing that you're tolerating and you're doing, they're going to drag you for it. They're going to call you out for it. And they're like, unacceptable social behavior. So because we weren't willing to clean up that behavior, we had to kind of stay in the shadows. So that's the logic that I think was there.
While you're in this progress, you've got, when you get the admin powers, that's when you've reached out to Theo. Theo, what are you doing while Lane's trying to, kind of fight the battles with the other guy? What's your role here, and how are, I mean, obviously as much off of Vinnie's shoulders as possible while he's dealing with the back burner, but what else do you have going on, and what have you and Vinnie even talked about at this point?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess back then I was still just kind of, my role was similar to what it is now. It was kind of working with the GMs, kind of big picture stuff, planning out pay-per-views. Like, so I book most of the pay-per-views, and like I don't write matches. So as a trade-off to not writing matches, I judge pretty much everything. Unless I happen to be in a match, which is rare. But it happens. So I was kind of overseeing the GMs, working with them. I would step in and run a show if one of the GMs needed time off. We try and have multiple GMs per show, so the guys can either work on the shows together or kind of alternate. I just feel like that it helps with burnout. That's something I've always been a big proponent of, even back when I GM'd previously, was trying to have like teams of GMs and not just one guy per show. So my role was doing that kind of stuff and working with Lane on just keeping the site going, discussions, bigger picture stuff. My role is not as it's not that dissimilar now to what it was then. I would say I probably have more of a hands-on approach with like site stuff from time to time, like creating boards or editing things if they need to be, changing pictures, stuff like that. But for the most part, I stick towards just like the cards and the results and the judging. Everything we do is a group discussion. Like, there nothing that we propose is really ever done with just one person's say so. Like, we discuss everything, whether it's role play limits or how often we're having shows, what we're gonna book for pay-per-views, you know, everything. I can't really think of an example where Lane just like went and did something without discussing with everyone else. And then he can do that because that's his, as the owner, that's his right, but it's not something he does. He wants the input because I think he understands that, his way may not necessarily be the best way, and people have different perspectives that they can offer, that maybe what he's thinking is a good idea, but maybe there are things that we can do that make it slightly better. And talking to the GMs, get their buy-in, get their opinion helps helps to make the idea a great one. As an example, we have this new one play or one role play thing that we're going to try out. That was an idea that I don't want to say come up with, because again, I feel like 98% of feds, they have one role play per show, but it's not something we do here, with the exception of Anarchy and the micro stuff. So I had proposed it to Lane and said, hey, here's what I'm thinking. What are your thoughts? I had asked the rest of the GMs to get their thoughts as well. And Lane's response was, yeah, I like it. I think it's a good idea. It'll help bring more people in. That's the goal. I was going to do like a 3,000 word limit on it, and he was like, why don't we try no word limits instead? And I was like, I don't really love that. Like, to me, when I hear no word limits, I have this fear that some asshole like Chris Page is going to write a 10,000 word RP, and like, who wants to read that? Just kidding. I love your stuff, sort of.
Well, I wouldn't drop 10,000 words. I have ADD, and that's how I kind of base my shit. If I lose track of it, I should stop.
Yeah. So I mean, so Lane was the one who came up with this stipulation that if you want to do the one play rule thing or one role play rule thing, then the rule itself or like the intricacies of it will be based on the show that you do it on. So if you do it on Savage, then you have 3,000 words. If you do it on Warfare, one role play still, but no words. So that was his input to it. So just, I think by having that back and forth discussion, we came up with a rule that I think is really interesting and works for multiple parties. And again, we got the input from the GMs to see what they thought. If everyone was like, no, I think that's shit, we're not going to do that, then we wouldn't. I don't think either of us would ever say, well, no, this is what we're going to do. I don't care if you like it or not. So that's kind of my, that's my example. And that's kind of what I do is dealing with some of the day-to-day stuff, working with the GMs, kind of being that buffer so that Lane can handle the big issues as they come up and I can handle some of the day-to-day more minor stuff, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that Theo's role, as he said, has been pretty consistent, and I always sort of thought of him as like he's like the top of the GMs, right? Like, so we have like a teams running Savage, 2 GMs that run Savage, 2 GMs that run Warfare, but Theo's kind of over all of them, right? So, and that's kind of the way I've always sort of looked at it. He and I are really in sync as far as our opinions. In judging and stuff like that. I think it's extremely rare if he and I judge the same role play that we don't come up with the same opinion. So that's why I always thought he was like really just the best judge for all the RPs. Because a lot of times, man, some of these guys that we've had in GM positions, we would joke behind the scenes, just be like, "What did this guy read?"
Like, and this guy read like,
yeah.
That's the difficult part about, having to rely on other people. I used to have a panel back in my day. I'd have 5 people taking a look at it, and just to check myself, more than anything else, because I wanted to see if what I'm looking at, so the same people are gonna. And I get what you're saying. Like some people could be so far off base, it would make you wonder if they read anything at all.
Yeah, and Theo mentioned another point too about the importance of, not really being heavy-handed in that main, like that ownership role. I've always brought every idea to the table as far as like, okay, you guys are the GMs, you guys are the ones who are gonna end up having to execute this stuff on a day-to-day basis and make it a part of your show. So of course, like I just felt like it would be wrong if I just threw down a mandate, right, and said, okay, we're gonna do it this way now. Like your show is gonna be this now, and this is how you have to do it. Like I've never wanted it to be that way. Like who would want to work in that environment? That's why a lot of people quit in the first place from those GM roles because they didn't like that sort of thing. I know from what I understand of the way that judgments went down previously, it was quite often you'd have 4 GMs voting in one direction, and then the owner just overruled all of them and said, "No, I like this one better. This one wins." I didn't want to do that. That's stupid. If 4 people disagree with me, I'm probably wrong.
You would think. Stranger Things. That's where you get that reference from all the time for me when I talk about old school XWF. Stranger Things, brother. Stranger Things. At what point in time, I can only imagine the battles that you were having to fight. And hey, let me be one of the first to say, thank you for fighting them, because if you didn't, there's no telling where the Federation would be now, if it would even be in existence. You have, we'll get there, but you've changed the landscape completely. What point did you start seeing a turn where the shit's working? We're getting there. So I'm starting to see some forward progress and the shifting of the narrative, if you will.
I would say it was pretty rapid, honestly. I want to say by the end of 2016, early 2017, that's when we got guys like Chris Chaos. Um, that's, I believe, Robert Main came in around the same time, and that was kind of like a boost for me, because I was like, okay, like these ideas are working, right? Like these guys are good, so they're replacing guys who maybe quit because they didn't like my direction, but the guys who quit usually weren't very good anyway, I guess.
Well, here's a question for you: why would they quit if you know the former guy is still in that chair? You know, are they? I was going to ask you, did you get any pushback initially when you were trying to do your thing?
Oh yeah.
And well, why? Because if the dude's still in power and can pull a card at any point in time, why would they get that upset?
Because he didn't care. Like he didn't care enough to get involved to that degree. He wanted to own it, but not have to do any work. Um, which is great. I mean, I do that now, but I think I am a lot nicer about it. No, but I mean, it was really just like I said, as long as I didn't change anything too fundamentally. That's why it wasn't ever like officially like, okay, you can't say this. We're not going to do this um, right off the bat, because I couldn't. If you look, I mean, around the time that I said when the purchase or when the ownership transition happened in 2019, those things happened pretty much immediately after that point. But from 17 to 19, I was kind of limited. But it was also just more like the shows themselves became more written more like an actual wrestling program, or at least an e-wrestling e-fed program, versus what it had been before, which was fucking nonsense. So people liked it, but the people who liked the nonsense, they left.
Which is a breath of fresh air that some of those weeds started weeding out with the negativity.
Yeah.
When you make the transaction, and
Don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. By the way, most people stayed, but some did leave.
and I mean, I know it broke your heart.
Yeah, it was very hard for me.
I mean, you probably still have therapy sessions today about it. I can only imagine.
Yeah, I have a photograph of the crimson dong right by my bed, and I cry over it every night.
I mean, if the world only knew what they were missing, right, brother? I'm just saying.
Classic 5-star matches sell out the Tokyo Dome.
I mean, only few can do that, and the Crimson Dawn, man. I'm just saying. 2019 gets here. You've put up with it. You've put up with it. You've put up with it. You don't put up with it no more. I mean, not to say it that way, but what leads to the agreement being made that there would be a transition of power within the Federation behind the scenes?
Honestly, that kind of came out of nowhere. I was one of the last to know. Actually, Theo knew well before I did. Theo's the one who told me about it. It was apparently gonna get handed off some way or another, and me and Theo and a couple others decided, okay, we'll take it, right? Because the other option was he's going to give it to somebody else, and we'll all work for somebody else. This other guy that we don't even know. I have a guess as to who it was, and none of you guys would be here if it was that guy. So, but yeah, it was literally just sort of out of the blue. It was like one day, like, we're going to do this. Do you want to take it? So we took it.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
then
so if you don't mind, I'll just jump in just because you were the last to know. And I'll set that record straight just in case anybody ever wants to argue and say, well, you stole the Fed from the previous owner or whatever. That's not the case. And I mean, I still have the Discord chats to prove that. I think the previous owner had decided he was done, wanted to do other things, whether that was run other feds or just be out of it in general. He had approached at least one other person outside of the Fed and had approached at least one of the people on the GM team and said, like, I want to sell the Fed, what would your offer be for the Fed? That person put forth an offer. And the offer was just kind of outrageous, to be quite honest with you. The previous owner then came to me and was like, here's what's on the table. I could sell it to this one person, or I could sell it to, people in the Fed currently. Here's the offer that's on the table. I want to talk to the other GMs, get their opinion, and then I want to bring it to Lane last because I think he'll be more receptive to it if everyone else is on board. And I'm like, all right. I mean, I don't entirely understand that line of thinking, but I'll roll with it. But at the same time, like, as soon as I have that conversation with him, I go to Lane. I'm like, look, here's what's happening. Like, I want you to be aware every step of the way because it's not how I operate. So he knew before he officially knew, I guess, is probably the best way to say it. But he was still technically the last one to know about it.
Yeah, I was informed of it, and I was like, I believe my reaction was simply just like, oh, really, you know, um, and that might be what is said, Theo. It might have been said that I would be more quote unquote receptive of it if everybody else is on board. I think that's bullshit. I think I was the last to know because he didn't want it to be me. I think he knew that changes would happen, and there are changes that he would not agree with.
Yeah, I think that's very possible because I mean, when he brought it to the whole GM team, everyone was like, "Well, no, Lane, Lane's the guy. He's the one who's been running the Fed. He'll be the one that takes over." It was unison or uniform, whichever word you want to use in that discussion. It was never a, well, how about me or how about this person? It was nope, it's Lane's. It's his Fed.
It was very nice of you guys, by the way. I mean, it would have been very easy for somebody else to just be like, "Yeah, give it to me," right?
Right.
So it was cool. It's cool that nobody did that.
When you make the final transaction, the final deal happens, and the Fed becomes yours. Now you do not have handcuffs. As you touched on earlier, you made some immediate changes.
Yeah.
Let's talk about them. Let's get into them because this is kind of where ship kind of turns, and where I was getting at earlier, and I think we're almost there. Um, Doing research on my character in the Fed with that 90 chapter origin story. I was able to relive when I came in and as a talent, and it was around the March time frame, March or April of 2019. So not too far after you have secured the Fed, and your immediate changes were like, what you're within your first month or so. What kind of impact did you have? It's almost kind of like your first 100 days in office. What were your goals, and now knowing that this is your ship, and you don't have the handcuffs.
Yeah, I definitely think that was probably one of the first things and that reunion show was going to happen anyway. But once that transition took place, then it was like, well, why don't we just do it here, right? And I was like, why don't I make you a special part of the forums of the boards here, and we just do it here, and we invite all these guys to be part of the whole again. I was like, I think I even phrased it to Raven like, would any of these guys care? Like, would it mean anything to any of them to reconnect in that way? And he had, at least made it seem like for some of them it would actually mean a lot. So I was like, well, let's fucking do it. We can do it now. I can do whatever I want, right? I would say if that had happened a month previously, we probably would not have been able to do it.
I know. I know when he reached out to me, it was about the reunion show, and I can't remember when was the reunion show, Theo.
Let me see. In
I
Marlboro.
mean, I want to say that it was. Fuck,
Give me one sec. I'll have it for you.
It had to be right around that time, right? Because that's when all of those guys came in. You and famine of the vial.
Well,
September of 2019.
okay, so I came.
August.
Right. All right. So now I know where I came in was like April-ish, and Raven had hit me up, and it was initially about putting on the reunion show.
Yeah.
And he asked me if I had any interest in doing it, which is kind of interesting wording because it sounds like it just came right out of your mouth. And before I could even answer, this is all over Facebook, or he may have even texted me at that point. But it was like he said there's new ownership, and this within a second message was there's new ownership. I promise you everything is going to be okay. And I was still hesitant because I think he didn't tell me who you were. He didn't tell me who Theo was. He just kind of said there's new people. Would you be interested in doing the reunion show? I said, yeah, sure, for you. I'll do it for you. He's like, who you want to face? And my mind went to Ranma. He's a good friend of mine, a character. And he was here and he had longevity too in the John Brown era. And we were able to hook that up. When I came in, I think it was April-ish, Robert was the Universal Champion. So that means that Maine, I guess, won the belt in the former era, kind of transitioned into your era. How did let me go to this because I just have an interesting question. How did the Fed in general, when the transition of power took place, how did the guys that the role players and the handlers, how did they react to it? Favorably?
Mostly favorably, yeah. I think most people. I mean, because at that point, really, I was already. Me and Theo both were already like the day-to-day people that everybody went to and looked at as the quote-unquote authority anyway. The other guy, he might show up here and there, he'd post here and there, he'd have something to say here and there, but it just wasn't really around, you know. So I mean, most people didn't really have much connection to him anyway. And the ones that did, who had been around for longer, I mean, it was a 50-50 shot if they liked him, you know. So I like to think that most people at least like me. There's probably a couple that don't, but I think most of them do.
I mean, but in regards to either both of you guys, I haven't had a negative dealing with either one of you.
It's coming.
I mean, fuck ever, dude. I don't get paid for this shit. Just do it 'cause it's fun. It's too fun to argue about. No time for that. You know that we're old, bro. Come on.
Yeah.
You start seeing the immediate changes, and I mean, there's been a lot of evolution since 2019, and I've been, I guess, gracious enough to been a part of a good chunk of it. To see, when I came in, just from my perspective, like I was very hesitant, very kind of trusting, and didn't want to talk to anybody. Like I would only talk to Raven. I don't know if Raven had conversations with either one of you guys on my behalf.
Not really. And yeah, you're right. I don't recall interacting with you very much at all up until fairly, I would say fairly recently.
Oh yeah, I guess. I think we've always had a lot of back and forth. I've been mainly if I've ever had anything, I'd always go to Theo and be like, "Yeah, man, hit me up on this and talk to me about this." And he's always been very straightforward. And I don't think that when you deal with people, sometimes they just want to tell you what you want to hear, whether it's the truth or not. But I personal experiences, I don't get that from you guys. It's always to the level, and I don't really see a whole lot of people that complain about too terribly much unless it's just masked really well.
I mean, there's always going to be people who are disgruntled about one thing or another, right? I mean, people get annoyed if they lose. It's unavoidable. Nobody likes to lose, but somebody has to. It's tough to pick winners in the XWF because I think everybody's really good. And it can be really hard. Like I've told Theo numerous times. I told you, Paige, too, that I think it sucks that people have to lose. But I mean, what are you going to do? Like there are a lot of times that I've said, like, man, I really want this person to win, but they just didn't, and it makes me feel bad.
Yeah, I mean,
fair.
It's again, it's unless people have been in the chair, man, it's kind of a hard. It's hard for them to see the perspective of it. I think as 2019 progressed, you spoke on it a second ago. How big was it for both of you guys to get the reunion show together with Raven, and Raven to pull in as many of the older guys as he did?
I thought it was great. I mean, that my opinion, because like I said, going back a couple of years before that, when I had reached out to Raven previously in the first place, the whole idea was to get a bunch of these old guys back. And it didn't really happen at that time. But when the reunion was coming around and he was like, he was going to run it. He had his ideas, and I basically just told him, you do what you want to do. You just tell me what you need. And that's why, that has their own separate boards and things like that. And that's all him. I had nothing to do with it whatsoever. And I didn't really feel like I should have anything to do with it. But yeah, I mean, to me, I was thrilled when people stuck around, right? So when I didn't know if it was just like, hey, here's these old heads, they're going to come in, they're going to do their reunion show, and then they're going to bounce. And I felt like that would suck if that's what happened. But luckily it didn't. I mean, most people from that reunion show stayed, and that's what I thought was great. I mean, a few of them didn't, right? Obviously, but I would say all the worthwhile ones, all the really good ones did, and there wasn't any sort of bullshit drama other than from one guy, and it just kind of proved to me that what I had been told for all that time was wrong, and that we could do this thing that I had wanted to do, and it would have been great because it ended up being great.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the best things that Lane probably has ever done, was reaching out to Raven and getting him on board. And I think just the name Raven, there's a certain cachet to it. I don't think that if he had reached out to say you, or even to Scent or Fuzz, whatever, like to try and put on that show, that we would have had the success and the long-term success of getting people back if it was those other guys running it. That it was Raven, that he was able to get so many people to come back and stay, I think was awesome. Maybe part luck, I don't know, but I think it really, really was a fantastic thing for us, because there's a lot of people that stuck around from that, and there's some others that weren't involved but are older names that have come back because of it. People like Lee Stone or Heather. Maybe there's probably one or two others, but I think that was huge for us because we were able to get back some older names, people like you as well. It's like it was good for us.
Well, Raven
that
is
show was
Raven.
fantastic.
Raven is very detrimental, I think, to a
Hey, what
lot.
happened there?
Oh, you dropped, brother. Not a big deal.
Yeah,
Back
everything
in,
just went quiet.
you're in the mix, man. You dropped out. Not a big deal. Raven was to me, is very detrimental because he does have ties to a lot of the quote unquote older school talent that that were around back then and are still around now. You said it, your Sense, your Me's, your Warstein's always kind of been in the mix whenever he's wanted to be in the mix. Your Sense, I mean, there's just a lot that he can web out. But then the largest part of that OOC is, the guy's he's a pretty fucking decent guy. I have my loyalty towards him to come back when he asked me to, based off of, again, the things that he would do for me when I was in a spot. And I couldn't. Vinny, you know, and Theo, you do as well, because of just how hands on you both are with the product. If something were to happen to you guys and you have to disappear for 6 or 7 weeks, and you have to trust your product to somebody, and you're not here to see the day to day. My situation is it's a really stupid one. I was a dumb kid at the time, and I fucked my laptop up, and it was going to take me 6 weeks to get a new one.
Hmm.
The story, wasn't balling then. It was going to take some work to get a laptop. I had to trust the product to somebody, and Raven was that guy. When he asked me, it was a no-brainer. Absolutely, I'll do it for you. In the process, and I think, at least from the perspective of some of the guys that came back for the reunion show, that did stick around. Now, by then, when I first came in, I was kind of real, like I said, timid and just not. I didn't really want to talk to a lot of people. I didn't know how I was going to be received, and I knew the character that I was bringing in was not going to go over well. And it was for me, because I was, the heel. It's what I do. I get the heat, and I hit the heat with personal XWF. You know what I mean? Like, um, when lost my train of thought.
Yeah.
So what happens when you smoke? So what happens when you smoke a lot of pot?
Choke up, brother.
Yeah. Raven. Oh, the thought process. My thought. By then, I had been here for several months, and I had gotten to see that there was change, as far as how things were handled and the day to day operations, and how the Fed in general was going and moving forward. And I know with the handful of people that I spoke to after the reunion show, and they were contemplating if they're going to stay around, and they asked me if I was. Yeah, I am. I don't think that there's a problem with Vinny or Theo, and I think that was kind of when I start to really jump in and try and help write a lot of matches. Um, just because I think that's the only way that I could do my part, and I haven't been really good at it. And I know that you're only as good as your product that you put out. That's my mentality.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think that is, I from on my end of it, that I did definitely see that. It was, oh, hey, this Chris Page guy is writing a ton of matches. Like, that's awesome, and they're good. That's always good. And I think there's always some trepidation. There's like hesitancy there when somebody writes a bunch of stuff, because you're always worried of starting to rely on that guy, and then what happens if he bounces, and who's going to fill that void. But that's happened numerous times in the past, and we've been okay. So we'll be okay no matter what.
I think, I kind of want both of you guys' perception and perspective. Um, 7 years and 8 years, or 7.5 years and 8 years is a lot of times. There's a lot of progression. And I already know the answer to this question before I even ask it, but I think I kind of feel obligated to. Now versus, or then versus now, you know, how proud of you, or how proud are you guys of where you've gotten the Fed to overall? I guess I'll word it that way.
I think it's awesome. I mean, I think it was a good Fed when I joined it. Um, there was a lot of activity. I'll never deny that. I mean, there were a lot of people involved. There was a lot of cool stuff happening. I don't think we went over like the history of when I first joined, who was around and stuff like that. But I mean, we had a lot of heavy hitters who were really clicking. A lot of cool. Doc came in right after I did. Gator was in right before me, and those guys were all over the place and off to the races. And that was, it was running really well. I mean, there was 2 shows. They were coming out on time for the most part. Um, and it was a good read, and it seemed like everything was running kind of smoothly. It went off the rails a little bit a year or so later, and I can say from where it was when I took over as like the top guy basically to now is completely different, because it was in the shitter at that point when it was just me before I got Theo back in. There was hardly anybody on the roster. The stuff they were writing was stupid. The shows were stupid. Um, So I mean, now it almost looks professional in my opinion. It's like, we've got these shows, we got, plans, we've got a calendar, we've got this podcast, we've got, all these official Twitter accounts and things like that. It's there's a lot that's going on with it. There's a ton of word count that's coming out of it. And even though I would say the most marked difference is that there's not as much board activity now as there was back in 2014, because it was a lot more of people going back and forth in character in like attack threads and trash talking each other in threads like that. We don't see as much of that now, but I think the quality is just way better. And I'd put this roster against any roster of any Fed ever, and I think we'd come out on top.
We've talked
I
about it.
agree.
Oh, go ahead, Thea. Go ahead. My bad.
I would say, I agree. I think there have been times where maybe you have one or two guys who maybe are a step above everyone else. Like I'll use John Madison as an example. When I showed up, John Madison was leaps and bounds better than anybody else on the roster. Like it wasn't even close. There was him, and then there was a big gap, and then there was everyone else. And I think over time, I've seen that from here. Um, you know, but I think right now we're in a spot where we have a really solid roster top to bottom, and even like the quote unquote worst person in the Fed RP wise is better than most RPers and other Feds. Like we are, I think, heads and shoulders above all kinds of Feds because we have so many other options for people. We can do the micro thing. Now we're going to do the angled thing. We have, like I said, unlimited words, unlimited number of RPs. Like there's just so much for everyone. Like Lane said, it's professional. We have the podcast. It's just I think it's a cleaner product in so many ways. I think the roster is just fantastic. It's the most talented roster I've ever seen, top to bottom. We have clear divisions. Like if you were to say, who are your universal title people, I could name off 4 or 5 people that I think are in the universal title picture right now. If you were to say who are your mid-tier guys, I could give you 4, 5, 6 names right there. Who are the people that I don't want to say developmental, but like you can see that there's talent there. They just have some work to do. I can name off some of them too. And I can name off some people that are maybe mid tier or getting close to universal tier that were those developmental people a couple months ago. Like it's a very well balanced roster. And I don't know that that's always been the case. So, I'm excited. I'm excited to see what we have. It seems like we always have new exciting ideas, such as this podcast. And again, that was not even a management driven thing. That was something you guys came up with on your own. And it's probably the most popular thing our Fed has going for it right now.
It's hard to believe that this podcast deal was conceptualized and put together in like 72 hours, and we just haven't really looked back. The good news or the good thing about that was when I approached you. I think I approached you first, Theo. I may have approached Ben. I may have approached maybe Ben at the same time, but I wasn't gonna do it if you guys didn't say it was okay. But I think when I came to you guys with the concept of we're not going to be shitting on people. We're not, unless it's in good fun, like with Sent or, again, guys, hate his role plays. He loves it when you do it. Unless it's stuff of that nature, like, tongue in cheek. We're not going to bury anybody intentionally. And we just want to talk about what everybody has going on. You guys signed off on it. Had you not done that, then we wouldn't be here now. And we've done, I think we have 12 posted shows, and there's probably at this point, as of this recording, there's probably 4 or 5 that are in the can, just ready to edit and go. And the branching out and talking about different things that it's interesting shit when you really get to the meat and potatoes of it. And again, can't say it enough. Had you not signed off on it to begin with, we wouldn't be here.
Yeah, it was interesting when you came to me about it, and I don't know if I told you, Paige. I think I told Theo. I had I had actually downloaded like some podcasting software and stuff like that, and I looked into like buying a microphone. So I was like thinking of, hey, it'd be a cool idea to do like a podcast. But my concept for it would have sucked because it basically would have just been me talking, and it would have got boring really quick. So when you guys, um, when it came to me and said, Paige has an idea for a podcast, what do you think? I was just like, hell yeah, let them do it. They'll do it. It'll be great. Especially when they told me, like TK and Bourbon were going to be involved with it, because I have dealt with those guys enough to know that they're a lot of fun. So I was like, that sounds like something that could fly and be pretty cool.
Thank God for TK and Bobby Bourbon, because they definitely make it entertaining. And the thing is like our first real conversation was the first show that we recorded, and I believe we recorded that with you guys. Was the first time that we had all three of us even tried to do this. We're glad that it's appreciative, and that everybody likes what we're doing. I don't want it to be about like us. This is all done for the Fed. And that's where I think, that's where TK can show his appreciation for what everybody does, is by putting in the hours behind the scenes for the podcast that nobody ever sees. Bobby, same situation. Myself, like, this is just easy ways that we can give back to everybody else and get back to you guys, because you guys have given us the platform to do it with. So as long as you guys are happy with it, then we'll keep doing them. If it ever, go ahead.
No, I was just saying it's gotten nothing but positive feedback. I don't know how much people outside the Fed have listened to it. I hope some have, but I really don't know. The only people I've really talked to about it are already members of the Fed. But I mean, I think the channel has something like 30 subscribers to it, right? So I mean, that's not bad at all.
They start to climb a little bit here and there. I back when we first started it, I was a click whore. I was going to see how many times it was viewed. And we got several episodes that were over 100 views, but mainly, I think when it comes to perception of it, when it comes to TK and myself and Bourbon, man, we don't, as long as our Fed are enjoying it, we don't really care how many people listen to it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's the primary audience, right? I mean, it would be cool if, I'm always thinking of it in terms of, let's widen our audience. Hopefully it brings other people in. It's always my goal with everything. But if even if it's just us and it's just our thing, it's still great. It's still an aspect. It's something that makes the people who spend time typing thousands of words about imaginary characters, it gives them something back, and it gives them something to smile to.
We came to the initial understanding that when we brought all this up, is the world is such a negative place right now, or was then, and still kind of is now, and still living in the times of pandemic, and it just seemed like it would be an easy way to maybe entertain the 40 or 50 people that listen to it. As long as you're entertained by it, I guess it's a win. It's almost like running the Fed example. Like, as long as the end result is we've entertained, then that's ultimately what matters, right?
That's all we can do.
I mean, this has been a topsy turvy ride for you guys to start from the beginning to get to where you are now and where the Fed is right now. And I think I speak for just about everybody again when I say, thank you for putting up those fights back in the day. Because had you not, again, we wouldn't be here today. And I think that's where the Lord, I know for me personally, that's kind of where my loyalty lies. I know I don't just speak for myself, I speak for TK and Bourbon and several other people. We're here as long as you guys want us here, in character and out of character. I think I've told you guys that several times. Anytime you want me to go, all you gotta do is say the word.
That's very rare. I can there's probably less than 10 people that there's probably less than 5 people that I would say you're gone for good and you're never ever coming. It is very, very.
Yeah, I can only think of 4, honestly, off the top of my head, that would probably apply to. But yeah, I mean, I think in general, I think the Fed's probably in the best place it's ever been, and I don't mean from a roster perspective. I mean like from a community perspective. Um, I've had several people mention to me just like how much they've liked Discord chat lately, and just how they feel like things are more civil, not as toxic. I think is the word somebody used. I think really 99.9% of the stuff that we deal with, the things that we really wish we didn't have to, really have nothing to do with the people in the Fed or anything that's going on the boards. It's usually behind the scenes bull crap that involves other people that are just no longer here. I can't think of anything that's happened with a current roster member that has been something that we've had to deal with, or like that we've had to have conversations about or moderate or mediate or whatever. So that's awesome,
Nice
and
when
it's
it
been like
works out
that for
that way.
months, months. Yeah, you're
It's
right. It
it's
is. It is.
it always kind of works out that way. Um, I mean, there's always, some eventually, people will join up and it'll be a little bit of drama here and there, and it'll be this guy's bothering people, or we don't like this or that or the other thing to me about something. Usually, I like to think I'm pretty good at smoothing things over and just kind of giving people a perspective of, well, why don't you just give them a chance? Um, and things tend to kind of blow over once people recognize and kind of immerse themselves in the community, like Theo was pointing out. I have found that a lot of times it's as simple as, well, put this guy in the Discord chat and let him talk to everybody else OOC and see that everybody's pretty cool. And then all the other problems go away because they all like each other. Um, when I first joined, there was like a Skype chat, but not everybody was. And I know just that alone was like a point of problematic for people, because it was like, well, why are they in it? So I try not to do that either. I think, Discord itself is a great example, along with the podcast, of the RP community itself stepping up and making something cool happen. Discord wasn't my idea. I never even heard of it. That was Maverick. He said Discord's better than Skype. Let's give it a shot. Everybody will like it better. And he was right. And I think it's, the Fed is better because of it. Chris Page says, let's do a podcast. People will like it. He was right. And I think the Fed is better. So I think we all listen to each other's ideas, and it makes everything better.
Here's I got a $1,000,000 question, and we'll kind of tie a bow on this. Few questions. First, and this is both of you guys. Where do you see us going throughout 2021 and 2022? And for the listeners out there, any kind of sneak peeks at what we may or may not be seeing down the line here? Is there anything cooking that you can give a little teaser to the audience for?
I think we're always kind of trying to think of something that we can do, that we can add to the experience, right? The most recent, obviously, is like Theo said, the one RP option, which I think will be cool. Might lead to its own division, its own championship kind of stature, because I'm kind of the opinion, if you bring in people because they want this one RP option, then you kind of have to give them something too. That's probably the number one thing, but it's always, we're always trying to figure out, what can we do to shake it up? What ideas can we come up with as far as maybe an event or a match style, or a division of something. The shove-its are cool because they give me, people show me their ideas and what kind of things they think are interesting. That kind of gets me thinking of new stuff too. But I mean, I think it'll mostly just be more of what we're already doing. I mean, the visuals, the booking, all that. But I think we'll keep coming up with ideas that might or might not work, but we'll see.
I mean, in terms of what's coming down the line, so Relentless is coming up. That's in September. That's our WrestleMania 3-day event. This year's theme is noir. So I think last year we did, what was it, 80s or was it 90s? One year we did 80s, one night. Okay, so it was 80s, then 90s. This year will be noir. We have some ideas of where we'd like to take it in future years, so that'll be fun. I'm really looking forward to this one. It's an odd year in terms of calendar, ends in an odd number, which means it's a lethal lottery year. So that'll be exciting. People seem to really enjoy that one, unless you're Big D, and then you don't. Um,
Yeah.
and I think he does. He really does, and I'm sure he'll tell you all about why if you ask him. But I think it was the one we did 2 years ago, where we, instead of giving out a briefcase as a prize, we changed it to whoever wins gets to name the next pay-per-view and like the theme of it, and all that. And that was the first time we ever did that, and that seemed to be a pretty big hit. And
Yeah,
it certainly
I
was,
think
it certainly was for the person who won. But I think people in general really kind of like that idea. So I'm curious to see what happens this year with who wins it and what they come up with. That should be really fun too.
Brought us Cunt Fest.
Yep.
I mean,
Yep.
it doesn't get better than that. I mean, I think from a writer's perspective, I've said it many, many times before. I mean, I really think that this is the breakout year for the XWF, and I think that the sky's the limit. There's a plethora of tapped and untapped potential as far as writers that are in the Fed right now. There's a huge mixture, Theo, like you were talking about earlier, of just really good. You've got great, you've got really good, you've got good that can be really good, and you've got decent that could be really good. And then that whole tier system of, progressing yourself, I think that's here. And the right people are in the right places, making the right decisions.
we've seen
Uh,
we've seen a lot of guys go from, kind of, I don't want to say bad, but kind of, short. They write short. They're not very in depth and things like that, and have developed really, really well. I mean, we see it over and over again.
well, let's use this. Let's use Thunder Knuckles as an example right now. He debuted at Relentless 2019. Go back and read that pearl play.
Who was that?
And Thunder
TK.
Knuckles. TK.
Oh yeah. No, great.
Yeah,
example.
I mean, go read it. He'll be the first one to tell you it's a piece of shit. I went back and reread it not too long ago, and he's right. I mean, it's horrible. You go and look at some of it. Go to Relentless 2020 a year later and read his work. Now here we are. We're not quite a year later. We're we're almost there. We're within 4 or 5 months. Look at the progression as a character, and just look at that one example, and see how you gotta come in. You gotta get your feet wet. You gotta figure out what works and what doesn't work. If you progress your character and you progress yourself, you can go anywhere. Like that's the beautiful thing right now is every division you could anyone could challenge for just about anything right now.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can name, I mean, you look at the first stuff that Ned K wrote versus what he's doing now. You go back even further, you go back to 2017 or so and see the stuff that Robert Maine was doing when he first came in, compare it to today. It's very different. I mean, it happens to everybody. It happened to me. I mean, you look at the stuff that I was writing in 2014 and the stuff that I did a year or two later. I mean, I think that's the best thing that happens. And I kind of have a reputation in the GMs for, like, I always kind of like the lower end guys and I like to pump them up, and I kind of embrace that because I really do. Like, I always liked like the Dresden types and things like that. Like, those are my guys because those are the ones that I get to see turn into something else and watch them. Because the guys, once somebody's great, they're already there. And it's a lot more interesting to watch somebody get great.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%.
That's the best part of GMing, honestly, is watching that progression. Whether you have a hand in it or not. And by that I mean, like, there are some people who will ask for feedback and that's how they improve. Others will take it upon themselves to talk to other RPers or just read other people's work of, successful writers and they'll adapt that way. But seeing somebody turn into a monster, like you said, Robert Maine, who is arguably one of the best writers we've probably ever had, compared to where he was, when he first started, to see that progression is really kind of amazing. And you see it with others over time, and I'm sure there are people on the roster right now that, a year or 2 years from now, we're going to say, wow, that person has just, where they were to where they are is just phenomenal. And that, to me, that's probably the best part about being the GM.
There's another two quick examples, and we can wrap this up. It's like Connor and Mark.
Yep.
Look at where Mark came in at high stakes in November to where he is right now, and that's 6 months. 6 month time frame.
And there's a learning curve, right? I mean, there's always going to be a process of adapting, finding where you fit in, finding the way to make your style that works best. And that's, especially when you're coming from, if you were in a different Fed previously, and say you had a lot of success there writing a certain way, that doesn't mean that you're going to come here or go to any other Fed really, and also just immediately be, top of the heap or be really good, because everybody looks at it completely differently. Objective. So people have to adapt, and they have to grow, and they have to figure out what works. And luckily, those two have done a really good job of that. I mean, I think they've adapted phenomenally.
I think that was something Sent said on his podcast the other day. When he went to, was it UGCWA or whatever the acronym is?
Yes, UGWA.
He had the same thing. Like, he had to learn what was considered a good role play there, or what you had to do to be successful, because he was used to being here for a while. So I think it's exactly right. There's a learning curve. Somebody like TK, I don't even know if TK had been in Feds before. I feel like maybe he wasn't. I feel like he's just, one of Graves' buddies, and Graves is like, here, come to this place where you can write crazy, weird shit, and you'll get over. And he has, in a big way, he has.
That's exactly what happened.
A lot of great stuff has come out of this pizza shop in West Virginia. It's pretty amazing.
Except the pizza.
Except the pizza.
Yes. Fucking garbage.
Well, guys, I mean, I think we've covered this shit, man. It's quite the interesting story that you two have for the Fed, and where it's at now and where it's going. I know that I'm old and it's getting past my bedtime. So I want to thank you guys for literally taking a couple hours to chat with me about this, because I know that there are people out there that care just as much about the product as I do, and that this is going to be very insightful. Is there anything that you guys want to throw out to the roster before we wrap it up?
Well, I mean, if I could, I'd just like to get Bearded War Pig's opinion on all this. You got anything for me, Pig? No.
Just kidding.
Tumbleweeds.
I've wanted to do that since the first time I heard you do it. Sorry.
No worries. You're ripping my gimmick. It's okay.
The best gimmicks in the world are stolen from somebody else. So.
Indeed, it is. Well, again, guys, I appreciate it. It's been fun. Like I said, I know personal time, but the Fed's going to enjoy it. It's going to be good. Well, before we go again, Vinnie, you're here, you're live, and you're in almost living color. Why don't you take us out?
Not a problem. Today, tomorrow, every day hereafter, till the end of time. Go fuck yourself, Ghost Tank.
Thanks for listening to the XWF podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the XWF YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter at XWF1999. And don't forget to check us out at XWF99.com. Be sure to join us next time, where the action never slows down.